YouTube. How's it going? This is Kel. Alright, so we just got done with the 2020 Altibox Norway chess tournament. And it's been crazy exciting. Okay, so Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, started the tournament not having lost a game in 2 years. So basically, he only won or drew for the past 2 years. And as you guys know, a couple of rounds ago, he actually lost his first game to Jan-Christoph Duda. And so, like I told you guys before, I'm going to be having a chess legend about right there. Every time I'm going to periodically change it. And so what I did now is I just changed it to, Jose Raul Capablanca. He's a third world chess champion. And he actually wrote an incredible book called Chess Fundamentals. If you guys haven't read it, I would suggest you read it. It completely changed the way I think about the game. And it's just a great one. And so this game right here is Magnus Carlsen versus Levon Aronian. And like I said, it's taken from round 10. And if you guys are ready, this is going to be a full analysis. And we'll go ahead and take a look at this game. All right, so let's see what we got here. All right, so we got knight to f3. So that starts as the ready. So we have d5. So we're looking at Queen's Gambit decline type territory here. All right. And then let me pause this here. All right. All right, so we have c4. And so now we have the Queen's Gambit decline on the board. So we have e6, just defending the pawn. Knight to c3, attacking the pawn again. Bishop to e7. And so Magnus Carlsen decides, he's like, let's go ahead and just trade this. And so now we have the Queen's Gambit decline exchange variation. All right, so we got bishop f4. Just a nice square for the bishop to go to. You know, you always want your bishop to be attacking as much of the board as possible. All right, so we got c6, just making sure there's no tactics. There's nothing going on with that pawn over there. Queen to c2. All right, g6. Now, with this move is usually done to fianchetto with bishop, but as you can see, the bishop is on e7. So with this move, the intention is to go bishop to f5 and try to knock this queen here, kind of off its railing a little bit. And so we got e3, just preparing for this bishop to come out somewhere. And so, like I said, we have bishop to f5. Now, of course, you have a couple options. You can say, hey, I'm just going to move the queen here or move the queen up here. Or, you can move it in a bunch of different ways. But there isn't anything better, usually, in the game than to develop a piece. That's always going to be the goal. So we have bishop to d3. And so, like I said, there's different places you can move it to. But the ultimate best thing to do for every chess game is to just try to just develop your pieces as quickly as possible. And so, we're gonna go ahead and trade here. Bishop to d3, queen takes d3. All right, knight b to d7. So as you guys can see, both sides are doing pretty legitimate. White is already, they can basically castle on either side, and black, they have the ability to castle there on the king side. So, each side has developed their pieces pretty well. All right, so we got h4. Okay. Right. Okay. So yeah, probably the kid. Okay, so let's go take. Okay, so wait a minute. So we got H. All right, so wait a minute. So we have H4 and A5. All right, so if I have any chess coaches out there, or anybody trying to show anybody how to play the game, don't use this game. This game, this is a world champion and world champion contender game. So they have some definite, very deep knowledge of the game, but there's going to be some beginners that's going to be they're going to be playing the game and they're going to be throwing their wing pawns everywhere, and they're going to be like, hey, wait a minute, can I just, I can do this because the world champion did it. So just hide this game from their view till they get a little bit better, then come back to the game, show them the game. Because this is definitely kind of crazy. Now this move here, A5, it does, when you see the next move, okay, so we have king to F1. A little weird, I'm not going to lie. It's the world champion playing this, so, I don't know, maybe he has some super deep understanding that I don't have. He's like, hey, I'm going to do this because I'm Magnus Carlsen. Cool. So we have A4. All right, so A3. Okay, so as you guys noticed from some of my other playthroughs, this position, this structure should look familiar to you guys. Now, basically, the concept behind this is this one pawn on A4 is stopping the movability of these two pawns. It's kind of putting a clamp down, on those movements. So it's making it really hard for you to push something like this. And so it definitely has some in-game thoughts behind it, So and you'll see this this A4 move is going to come into play a little bit later in the game. So let's go ahead and just keep going here. All right, so queen B6, just attacking this B2 pawn. And so that kind of gives you a little idea too about that A4 move, because you know it's clamping down on, you know, that move. So it really weakens this B2 pawn. So, you know, we're gonna go ahead and check out that weakness real quick. Queen to C2, you know, just defends the pawn there. H5. Okay, so if I was to give you guys, so for those of you that want to just kind of go ahead and go through, and we'll just kind of go over this particular position. Like I'll go ahead and just continue to go forward. But if there's anybody who would like to stop the video, pause the video, and see what you would do as white in this particular position, just take your time, you know, take a look at the position, and if you were white, you know, what would be a logical move that you feel like, I mean, are you gonna, you know, move the rook over, or, you know, you're gonna, you know, like what would you do? So go ahead and just pause it real quick, take a second to take a look at it, and then just catch up with us in a second. Now, for those of you that wanted to just go ahead and go through, some of you guys might be taking a look at the position and saying, wait a minute. Okay, so he played H4, but he's not really doing anything like to protect this pawn, because if you notice, the knight's hitting it, the queen's hitting it, and it's only protected by the rook. So you're like, wait a minute. It's got to be just like a free pawn, right? All right, so let's take a look and see. All right, so right, so let's go ahead and make that move, right? So let's go ahead and take, you know, knight e4. So you're thinking, all right, cool, man, I want a pawn. I'm doing good. Let's say he has 6, I got 7. Like, I'm a pawn up, right? Cool. I'm attacking the queen. I can just move the knight back and be good. And, you know, they still got a castle, so they're not doing good, right? Actually, no. They actually are doing really good. And it's because of this tactic here. Now, something that I mentioned before is that the kings are still in the center of the board. You know, they're playing like kamikaze chess on the side, right? And so, you know, they're pushing pawns and everything, right? So you guys noticed that the king went from E1 to F1 at some point. All right, cool. And so the problem with that is now this king is on this diagonal. And so it makes it a problem because of this move here. So we got queen to A6 check. Now the problem is this king is checked, and also this knight is attacked twice. And so you've won a pawn, but you've unfortunately lost your knight. And so that's definitely something that Magnus Carlsen was calculating, and he said, okay, you know what? Like, I don't want to go into that. You know, I'm the world champion. I should know better. Let's just not even do that. All right, so we'll go back here real quick. All right, cool. So he goes ahead and just leaves that pawn alone, and he plays bishop to G5. And so we see castles. And in this particular position with this structure, it's not too bad, you know, because there's not really a lot that white can do, you know, to really attack the position. And especially you have to look at the fact that, you know, white's king is still in the center of the board. So, you know, you really don't want to be doing a lot of attacking anyway. All right, so we got knight to E5, rook over to defend the bishop in case there's any type of tactics that might come up. Bishop takes F6, knight takes F6. And we have a rook lift to H3. And so we're definitely trying to, like, you know, swing the rook over here, you know, get these points hit, you know, because like I said before, you know, F7 is usually an extremely weak square, especially when the rook moves over here this way. You know, it becomes a really, really tender point. And, you know, the king is the only one that's defending it. So that's why it becomes such a really tender point. And then there's, you know, anytime a lot of the times when you have sacrifices of pieces, you'll have them around this king side. And so, you know, you'll be making sacks like this or sacks like that, stuff like that, you know, and then the queen is going to be coming in. So, you know, the position does look kind of dangerous right now, you know, even so. So, you know, so basically queen B3 is going to prevent any type of a sack on this square. And so you have a decision. You say, okay, do I trade or do I go back? So he wants to try to maintain this threat on this diagonal. So he goes ahead and retreats. Also, it's not really a good thing to really trade here, because then this pawn comes in and it really just like super clamps this B2 square. And then, you know, you have the ability for knights to come in and maybe plop on this square and stuff like that. And you definitely don't want a knight plopping in on this square. All right, so we have knight to E4. All right, so we're trading down here. All right, so we have queen takes E4, bishop to D6, pinning this knight. So that's kind of nasty, you know, because the queen is actually undefended right now. And so you know, we have like threats of this move and stuff like that coming. So, you know, you definitely don't want to see anything like that. So, you know, we're gonna basically make it impossible for you to push this by pushing this rook over. So that's how the rook lift kind of comes into play now. So, you know, now we have to double our pawns because, you know, of course you're not going to take with the queen, you know, and just like, you know, throw the queen away for nothing. And so now we have a check as well as a double attack on the pawn. So you see that with your king in the board, there's a lot of tactics and stuff involved. So Take an example from this game and castle as early as possible. It also happened in the Bobby Fischer versus who was it? The Donald Byrne game. You know, the game of the century, where Donald Byrne said, "Hey, I'm good. He's a young kid. I'm gonna go ahead and just not castle lever," and then he just basically got windmilled to death. All right, so we have king to g1, and then we're winning this pawn back now. And so we have queen to d4. So we're just continuously tickling the queen a little bit. And now we're getting the queen, getting the queen over here by the king. So it's a pretty dangerous situation here, having the queen right there by the king, right there on this tender square. And like I said before, that f2 square is always tender. So we're pushing it, just creating space for our king for our queen to defend against any type of checkmates and stuff. Double attacking the pawn. So as you can see, pretty much for half the game, Levon Aronian has basically just been attacking, every single weak point that Magnus Carlsen has in his position, which it's just you're supposed to do in the game. But basically Magnus Carlsen has had to just pretty much defend the entire time, and so that's definitely not where you want to be. You don't want to just defend the entire game. Like, you want to create some stuff on your own. But all right, so we have rook to b1, just defending the weak b2 pawn. And so we got to defend that, defend everything. And so that's really the only way to defend everything. And rook back to c5, or rook to c5. Queen takes, rook takes. All right, so we're pushing the pawn. And so just backing you guys back up to the earlier point in the game, you remember how I was telling you about that a4 push, and having complications and stuff like that for the game. And so you see, it's kind of hard for Magnus Carlsen to really just kind of like uncoil himself from this position. You can tell that it's a pretty defensive position for white. And so we just got a little maneuvering here. So we got rook to d3, pawn takes, and so now you see we have kind of a weakened pawn here on a3. And so after all of that, after the a pushes and everything, we end up with this pawn here on a3, that's basically needing to be defended. And so we have rook down to a4, just attacking the weakness that white has. So like I said, black is just continuously weak, like attacking all these weaknesses and stuff like that. All right, so we have rook to c4, and so we need to do something to resolve this, because this is a problem here on e4. This pawn here. So we have a little series of rook trades here. So we're gonna go ahead and defend that pawn real quick with f3. Moving king over. And now, like I said in my previous videos before, guys, like, once you get the queens traded off the board, you've more or less kind of gotten into an in-game type of a situation. So, that's when you really want to start moving your kings out and getting your kings in a good central position, because, the kings become just as much a fight as all the other pieces and stuff like that. That's basically how games are, won and lost towards the end and stuff like that. So, all right, so we have king to e7. King to h3, you still have to hold, on connection with this pawn here, to make sure it doesn't get snapped off the board and everything. All right, so we got rook to d3, just getting the rook on an open file. It's the only completely open file in the game, so it's the most logical place for you to put the rook. And then, like I said before, you have this rook here that's on this 7th rank, and we call him a pig on the 7th because it's basically gobbling up everything in its path. So, all right, so we got rook to c4. King to g3. Now with the rook moving, the king has a little bit more ability to go. Now you see this king here is in the center of the board, and it's just like a monster in the center of the board there. Let me get this deleted. Back. Not quite that. Not quite that. Okay. Sorry guys. I accidentally skipped ahead a little bit. Forgive me. All right. So all right, so we have rook to d7, and so white tries to put his own pig on the 7th, right? All right, so we got rook to c3. All right, so we got rook to a7. Now, you have to defend that pawn. There's not really, a lot else you can do. You can't push it. It just creates another pass pawn for black. So, that's pretty much, one of your only options here. And so we're just trying to get this pawn, out of danger here, moving it to f6. So we got rook to a8. Just holding on to the pawn and staying on that file there. And so the king goes to d6, king up to f4. So the king is just making a gigantic walk over there to try to mess with that rook. So we have king to b7. So now we have to move the king, or we have to move the rook. And so we're trading here. And so we have rook to a3. rook takes a3. And so if you guys notice here, black has achieved two completely passed pawns. And so he has his rook over here. The king is, able to help these pawns out. So yeah, we have black here gobbling up this this pawn on g6. We're pushing b4. We're gobbling up the pawn on f6. And then now we have our passed pawn all the way to b3. And so if you guys are looking, so we have only 2 pawns for black, but these are 2 completely monster passed pawns. And there's not a lot, preventing them from going all the way down the board. And you still have the same thing for white, but as you can see, the pawn race is definitely being won by black right now. And so we have rook to f7 check, king down, rook to f8. All right, rook to a7, just trying to make sure we have a block for any checks, and we do have a check. Rook to b8 check, and we have the blocking of the check here. Now, some of you guys might be out there thinking, okay, wait a minute, hold on. So he has 2 pawns, and I have 3 pawns. So like normally when you're up material, like you want to trade, you want to trade down, and then that's just going to be better for you. Normally, yes, but unfortunately in this particular position, it doesn't quite work. And it's because of something we call the square of the pawn. And so like if we were to go ahead and just try to, figure out what that is. So let's go ahead and trade down like you guys, like we're saying, because we were up material, right? This king comes down, but unfortunately it's not in the square of this pawn. And so as you guys can probably visualize now, it's not going to be able to come down and get into the, it's not going to be able to stop this pawn from promoting. Right? And so it's like if you have something like this, you're just not able to stop this pawn. The pawn just turns into a queen. So naturally in this position here, Magnus Carlsen calculates this and he says, okay, well, yeah, I can't go into that trade because then I'm not going to be able to get to this pawn. And now when you get on, the level of him or, really strong players level, because of your in-game training and your tactical training, like you're able to just visualize this type of stuff, And so Magnus Carlsen says, screw that. We're not doing that. Let's just go ahead and move back over here. So he goes ahead and gets back on the open file. I mean, his goal at this point now is to try to get behind the pawn to make sure it doesn't promote. And so we're just pushing pawns. So the king is having to try to come and assist with that too. And so we have c3. And so as you guys can see, basically black is having to use his strongest piece and his king to try to make sure that these pawns don't promote. And so that's definitely not something that you want to be doing with your, your strongest piece on the board is basically making it babysit, the pieces and stuff like that. So as you guys can tell, even though white is up the pawn, he's very down positionally in this type of position here. And so we have rook to b1, king to c5, king to d3, and it is actually in this position that Magnus Carlsen resigns. And watching the video of it, you can tell he's very disgusted with the situation. I don't know if he's thinking about he had calculated something and it just didn't end up quite like he thought, or he just, he just knows this position is lost. But basically, there are like so many different ways that you can win this position as black. I mean, you can walk the king over here and get that out the way. Yeah, you can walk the king over here, and then basically you're just forcing these pawns through. You can also just push. Well, I mean, of course you're gonna have to go. You're gonna have to go here first, and then you can push this pawn down. You can start pushing this pawn down. It's just like there's just so many different ways. Like I said, the in-game concept here in this position is even with these pieces, like in no man's land. Let's say we put them over here, right, and they're just all the way on the other side of the board. You push this pawn. Anytime you have 2 connected passed pawns on the 6th rank, a rook is powerless against one of them being able to promote. Because if we were just to make some random moves real quick, let's just move these pieces back off here. We're doing that. King got checked. All right, cool. You push this pawn down here. Well, let's just do that. All right, so you push this pawn down here, and I mean, as you can see, there's not really anything that this rook can do against these pawns. Of course, it can't take this pawn because it's just going to be gone. And then once you do push this pawn, let's say we just make another random move real quick. As soon as you push that pawn, you take the pawn here, and then this is a queen here. And so that's why, that in-game concept, you're not even able to stop 2 connected passed pawns with something as strong as a rook. All right, guys, that is the game. And like I said before, Magnus Carlsen came into this tournament and he had a 2-year either win or draw streak, and he has not lost a game. And then he also hasn't lost a game as white in 3 years, so all the way back to 2017. And so this this tournament has been a really crazy tournament. There's been a lot of ups and downs, and I mean it's basically it's definitely something that people have been kind of counting down the days to, you know, when Magnus Carlsen might lose again, because nobody's perfect. You know, he is the world champion, so definitely, you know, right now the best player in the world, but you know, like I said, nobody's perfect. So I appreciate you guys for coming and checking this game out with me. If you have any comments or concerns or questions, go ahead and put them in the comments below. And if there's any other games you want me to analyze or, you know, give my thoughts on or do playthroughs or whatever, go ahead and just send me a comment, send me a message, whatever, let me know. And I'll be more than happy to do that for you guys. But I appreciate you guys coming by. Go ahead and subscribe and like for me, and just let me know. All right, you guys have a good day. Appreciate it.